Families. They represent all the hope and promise for the future. Every parent's first priority for a child is safety. But what happens if safety is not really safe? What if a false version of health and safety is accepted? One that puts children directly in harm's way.
Well, my name is Rick, and I've been out since I was 15.
People from Los Angeles to Boston, from Columbus to Vancouver, are concerned about the increasing push to present homosexuality in a favorable light to teens and children.
This is what we call a safe schools program. This is what's all about teaching our children not to commit suicide. Where are the doctors? Where are the psychiatrists? This was how to do things that I don't want to mention in polite company, but we'll give you credit for if you learn it and you're a teacher. This has invaded the soul, the conscience of a nation. And parents do not have rights anymore, because if you try and move on those rights, you will be called a homophobe. You got it? And it's wrong. I am not a homophobe, and I do believe that parents have rights too.
Homosexuality was greatly embraced in my high school, and it was just not accepted to argue with homosexuality at all. It was a really big social faux pas. It wasn't cool, and as time went on, it was harder and harder for me to express my faith.
We have been involved in setting up forums on the truth about homosexuality, inviting medical doctors, psychiatrists to give the true picture about their particular lifestyle. And we have also organized forum on Gay and Straight Alliance Club to educate the public, to alert the public of what these kind of clubs essentially are. They are not just ordinary clubs. They are a propaganda club.
It's obviously very prevalent in our culture. It's obviously very prevalent in our schools, and the attack is on for our kids. But the price for our children is much higher than we as a nation should be willing to pay. The damage is too great.
Should the controversial topic of homosexuality be discussed with students in classes, in clubs, in church? Or are there reasons to avoid this topic altogether when impressionable young minds and high-risk sex practices are involved? Opinions on this topic are strong.
I said earlier, if most parents understood the depth of the homosexual agenda in the schools, there would be a revolution. They just wouldn't stand for it. Their children are being sexualized, and then they're being tempted into homosexuality. It's that clear now. But you'll never know that from media accounts. It's all about safe schools. It's all about stopping bullying. It's about things that we would all value, such as human dignity and being fair and being tolerant.
The sadness is that our children are now being exposed to it in such a way that it is so insidious. It is being taught as something that is, they bring out the issue of tolerance, they bring out the issue of diversity. They are skewing the meaning of all these words from what they used to be to something totally different.
Now, California students continue to rank dead last in national academic test scores. And yet we're going to take valuable classroom time and teacher training time to promote a social agenda.
Are there reasons to believe homosexuality is different today? Is it a civil right? Will some people just inevitably be homosexual, as supporters claim? Or is it a behavior that can and quite often does change? and with serious, even fatal diseases like AIDS involved. Is there any reason at all to celebrate the homosexual behavior of youth?
There is no genetic evidence that there is a gene for homosexuality. Number one. Number two, the activities are high risk across the board and shorten life. The evidence is very clear on that.
Studies continue to show there is no evidence of a genetic connection, but instead grave health risks for people involved in homosexual behavior. Promiscuity levels are much higher, particularly among male homosexuals, than in the population at large. This naturally generates much higher rates of sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS, syphilis, and others. Depression, substance abuse, and more mental health problems are reported by homosexuals even in places like the Netherlands, where these lifestyles are more socially acceptable. And one major study in England demonstrates that overall, homosexual men can expect to lose 20 years of life expectancy. Yet still in classrooms, on MTV, in clubs, and even in some church groups, students are learning that some people are simply gay, and it can't be changed. Anyone who dares to disagree is quickly labeled a bigot or a supporter of violence. Once these radical ideas were confined to certain permissive regions of California or Massachusetts. The reality is that now these deceptive messages are heard throughout North America and at the highest levels of government.
And in some cases, seriously hurt and sent to the hospital, as 2 students have been just recently in Northern California. One student kicked so badly that he had to have stomach surgery and will not recover. Another had the word faggot scratched into his chest with a ballpoint pen.
That was a very dramatic speech given by Ms. Kuehl, and I agree with her. If people are harassed or intimidated or acts of violence are committed against anyone for any reason, they should be punished. But you know, when I asked Ledge Council 3 years ago when a similar bill was brought forth by Ms. Kuehl to tell me whether or not all the incidences that were described in committee were already covered by existing law, the answer was yes. We have among the strongest laws in the country for harassing gay students, my friends. What then is the agenda here? It's hard not to come to the conclusion that there is an agenda here that has nothing to do with violence against gay students.
Let's be clear for the record. We don't want any kids abused. We don't want any kids taunted. All children have been created in the image of God and should be highly valued. But we can teach children how to be civil toward those who appear different without teaching them the falsehood that homosexuality is normal and healthy.
Well, it is the guiding principle of most sex education today that children are autonomous sexual beings. Homosexual activists have seized upon the Kinsey view of sex, and they realized that it would be a hard sell to the American public. So instead, they began a Safe Schools campaign.
Many believe outright promotion of homosexuality is behind some of the new emphasis on so-called safety, tolerance, and diversity. There is even federal funding available to teach young children to accept homosexuality. These funds are included under the category of hate crimes, provided by the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program, which lists homosexual activist groups as valued resources. Linda Harvey, president of Mission America, has been monitoring the promotion of homosexuality to children.
The brochure that outlines the Safe and Drug-Free Schools program is online. You can find it if you search the Department of Education website. It's called Preventing Youth Hate Crime. And here's how it starts out. It says, quote, prejudice and the resulting violence can be reduced or even eliminated by instilling in children an appreciation and respect for each other's differences. You go on down and you find out that some of the differences we're supposed to respect include homosexual, bisexual, and transgender behavior. But what I thought was very, very strange is I began to look at this, and it's couched in very seemingly innocuous language, you know, education-ese, your eyes glaze over, and then you get to the back, and the resources section lists PFLAG and another youth advocacy group. No pro-family resources are listed, and I thought, wait a minute, this is taxpayer funded. It's as if the traditional view doesn't exist.
What we are talking about is behavior. We are not talking about some innate genetic state. We're not talking about some third, fourth, or fifth gender. We're talking about behavior.
Dr. John Diggs explains the trends in AIDS cases among young males reported by the Centers for Disease Control.
The homosexual lifestyle is characterized by extremes of promiscuity. The preponderance of maleness in AIDS diagnosis starts early in life and reflects sexual activity which occurred somewhere between 10 and 17. And again, those 10, 12, 14-year-olds are not having sex with each other. They're having sex with older men. If in our school systems we decide that it's permissible, okay, and even celebratory to teach that homosexuality is a viable alternative lifestyle, we must then therefore take some sort of moral and medical responsibility for these excess level of boys who are coming down with AIDS diagnosis. And these boys die. They don't go home. They don't live to be 65.
While more and more schools are embracing this agenda, some schools believe this would be a very harmful message to send to our children.
I'm a middle school principal, and so I see middle school students as very vulnerable to our culture and to the influences around them. The kids are very impressionable. And so for them to have this constant bombardment from a pro-homosexual lifestyle is very threatening to them and damaging to them.
Yet many children will be endangered because our state and national leaders are embracing this ideology.
In California, we're witnessing an extreme top-down model as to what's happening in public schools. And basically, state legislators are imposing their own agenda on the public school system. We now have 4 very open lesbians in our state legislature, and we started passing this legislation as soon as they took office. And I see this picture up here. Well, this is part of a story called Jesse's Dream Skirt. And this is recommended reading in a curriculum used in California called Preventing Prejudice for elementary K through 5th grade. Well, Jesse's Dream Skirt is a little boy who wants to wear a colorful skirt to school one day, and of course, his mommy stays up all night and makes him this colorful skirt, and he wears it to school, and the children laugh at him. And one little boy actually says, boys can't wear skirts. And the little girl says, why not? And he says, because my daddy told me. But don't worry, because at the end, everybody is cross-dressing and they're all happy.
Some people believe that the topic of homosexuality itself introduces unnecessary stress into the lives of impressionable children. Proponents say some students are simply going to be homosexual regardless, and that they need role models and information. One group working tirelessly to get information about homosexuality into the hands of as many children as possible is GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. GLSEN was started in the early 90s by a homosexual teacher named Kevin Jennings in the state of Massachusetts. Marjorie Rosenberg has practiced psychotherapy for 25 years and has written several articles in major journals about homosexuality. She's been following the growing influence of GLSEN as a force in shaping programs directed toward all students in schools.
I went to their 4th annual conference, which was held in my state in the year 2000. I learned that the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network not only had greetings from then President Clinton, from our mayor, from the congressman of the area in which the conference was held, from our governor, its keynote speaker, and this is tactically of the utmost importance, was the president of the largest union in the United States, the National Education Association, which has 2.6 million members.
One of GLSEN's major priorities is to establish homosexual clubs, what they call gay-straight alliances, in as many schools as possible. They claim there are now clubs in over 1,000 U.S. high schools, as well as a few in middle schools.
Basically what they are is they're clubs, they're called across the country, they're called gay pride clubs. And we have more in this state than in the rest of the country. And they call them here gay straight alliances, and what they do is they encourage young people to come and talk about homosexuality. And the problem is that 25% of 12-year-old children say they don't know whether they're heterosexual or homosexual.
Massachusetts parents were outraged several years ago when they learned about an especially dangerous program for students sponsored by GLSEN. Peter LaBarbera is a writer and cultural commentator who has been reporting on the homosexual agenda for years.
I've tracked GLSEN since they began several years ago, and it's clear from its record that GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, is a hardcore, anti-Christian, anti-religious organization which really doesn't believe in right and wrong, and I think that's another important effect of the homosexual movement in schools. If homosexuality isn't wrong, two men having sex together, it's hard to say if anything is wrong. We had a parent who went to a GLSEN conference called What They Didn't Tell You About Queer Sex and Sexuality in Health Class. It was March 25th, 2000. GLSEN sponsored it. It's called Teach Out, and this particular workshop was advertised to youth only ages 14 to 21. Well, I advised Scott Whiteman, a parent, an activist on the good guy side in Massachusetts, to go take a tape recorder, because I told him nobody will ever believe what you come up with. So he taped it secretly at the session, and what they talked about was, among other things, fisting, which is too gross to describe here.
At the radio station, a tape was dropped off. I listened to it. It was outrageous. The content was XXX rated, and it was intended to educate children and teachers. The Mass Department of Education actually gave credit for this kind of information.
While groups like GLSEN and PFLAG are shining the light of suspicion on traditional values, what do they consider to be safe for our children? Well, it's some of this same thing we've been talking about with sex between adults and minors, sex between children. The president of GLSEN, Kevin Jennings, wrote the foreword to this book, Queering Elementary Education. Queering. And there's some stuff in here that you just can't believe that people would put before children.
The group PFLAG, Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, has also worked hard to promote these ideas in schools and in certain churches where homosexuality is accepted. A PFLAG question and answer brochure for curious youth says, "No one knows exactly how human sexual orientation, gay or straight, is determined. Most experts think it's a matter of genetics, biology, and environment, that a person's sexual orientation could be set before birth or as early as 2 or 3 years old." Earlier claims of a genetic connection to homosexuality have not panned out as activists hoped, yet homosexual activists still try to leave the impression that certain experts have made such a discovery. The facts don't support this. Many people have successfully and permanently left the homosexual lifestyle. But ironically, groups like PFLAG, GLSEN, and others support the freedom for youth to explore all kinds of sexual behaviors. Many observers point out that this contradicts their claims that homosexuals are a fixed, unchanging minority group with rights. If a person can't change, why would such exploration be necessary?
justification. Homosexuality was to be presented as an inborn trait absolutely equal to race. And on this basis, tolerance was necessary. The tolerance, the need for, quote, diversity, has now reached a new level. Their behavior is an inherited orientation, has been belied by the direction the movement has taken in the last 5 or 6 years. In the universities, which actually extols continual sexual experimentation, and which regards a stable sexual identity, whatever it is, as a coercive restriction on individual autonomy. They talk a lot about sexual fluidity. They talk a lot about transgendered people. Transgender is defined by the activists as someone who alters his gender by his or her gender by dress, hormones, or surgery.
The category of transgendered has recently been added to the homosexual rights menu in schools. Peter LaBarbera discusses material promoted by GLSEN.
These are plays written for kindergarten through 6th grade audiences. This is called In Mommy's High Heels. He brings his mom's high heels to show and tell. In Mommy's high heels, the world is beautiful. Let the peasants choke way down below. I'm standing high above the crowds. My head is breaking through the clouds. In Mommy's high heels, I'm 10 feet tall. You know, this is anarchy, and this is, I got to say, I've been at least shocked about how quickly they've embraced the transsexual agenda, but I guess it's logical if you have no limits and there's no, you've broken down the barriers of sexual behavior, why would we believe that there would be anything holding them against gender confusion?
PFLAG believes grade school children should learn about this new choice to be transgendered and allowed to dress and behave like the opposite sex. The group also believes adolescents should be allowed to have sex change hormones or surgery. At school, activist demands are challenging long-standing school policies. Some schools have decided to allow transvestite students and teachers to use the restrooms of opposite-sex students or staff. And some of these role models for our children have returned to teaching positions at schools after becoming members of the opposite sex. So what happens when parents speak out about the homosexual agenda in schools? Robin Webb found out when she tried to object to the one-sided view of homosexuality presented to high school classes.
Well, my daughter came home while she was a junior in high school, and her American Studies class was starting a diversity tolerance unit. Homosexuals were one of the minority group in which they chose to do a report on. And this was one of the books in which they recommended the students read Entries from a Hot Pink Notebook, written by Todd D. Brown. The story of a 15-year-old and his entries as he is discovering that he is indeed, in his idea, a homosexual.
When I chose to do this report on homosexuality, I did not realize I would be the only one to talk about some of the problems and realities related to that lifestyle. The other students, they arranged for a speaker to come in a local gay activity group, and they came into the class, and I noticed that this was definitely a one-sided teacher-supported project that was happening in our classroom.
When my husband and I talked to the vice principal of the school, she told us that she could not interfere, that it was a matter of academic freedom for the teachers as well as freedom of speech for the students. Then we went ahead and talked to the teachers and showed them the passage, one of many passages, but this one in particular, where two 14-year-old boys were described as having explicit homosexual sex. They did not seem to see anything wrong with this. They explained it away as this was part of his experience of coming out as a homosexual. So we went ahead and made several copies and passages within this book, and we passed them out to parents at sports events, meetings, in the grocery store. And because of that, the high school took a number of phone calls, and it became an issue within the community as well as it went to the school board.
The use of inappropriate teaching material has been the root of many of the concerns of parents in the U.S. In Vancouver, the concerns of a group of parents has been taken all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada.
In 1997, April of 1997, a homosexual teacher from Surrey asked the school board to approve 3 books about same-sex families for use in the curriculum at the kindergarten and grade 1 level. The board refused to approve them as curricular resources and were subsequently taken to the Supreme Court of British Columbia, where we lost. We appealed, and we won the appeal, and currently our case is being reviewed by the Supreme Court of Canada. The books involved were Ash's Mums, Belinda's Bouquet, and One Dad, Two Dad, Brown Dads. No, One Dad, Two Dads, Brown Dad, Blue Dad.
In addition to parents, some teachers are trying to take a stand against the homosexual agenda. But for veteran math teacher Frank Wagner of Vancouver, providing information about the health risks of homosexuality has subjected him to professional discipline.
Specifically, what I did was give to the 15 or so staff and counselors in the school that were promoting this gay and lesbian, or gay straight alliance rather. And the article that I gave them was called Medical Consequences of Homosexual Behavior. And I didn't get one thank you for that. I thought, if there's anything that these people would want to see, it would be what happens, if people engage in homosexual sex. And they weren't interested. They didn't want to hear about it. They didn't want to talk about it. They wanted me to basically to shut up.
Just for giving his colleagues copies of an article with unfavorable health information about homosexuality, Frank Wagner was called before hearings of his school board, as well as the British Columbia Teachers Federation. Yet, students taught in Wagner's classes routinely achieve some of the highest mathematics scores in Canada. In order to achieve the desired goal of more sexual freedom for younger and younger children, community social groups for homosexual youth have been formed all over the U.S. and Canada.
There's an organization called Boston Area Gay Lesbian Youth, okay, which encourages people from 12 to 22 to mingle together. And also it is run by older people. So these kids, teenage kids, are all invited to go to this organization. They call it Bagley. They're invited to go all the time. And they have right on their website that, they teach homosexual sex. And also this group is also funded by the state. The state pays them to go out and talk to these gay straight alliances. So the state is paying these people to go out and talk to the students. And what they're telling them, I have no idea, except I see what they say on their website. I see what they say in the literature they send them. And I also saw recently there's some literature they handed out where they offered them, they had intimate discussions with 8 or less children at a time, and they paid the children $25 to come see them. And they also said, if you're good, we'll take you to a 3-day retreat at the New Hampshire lake. Now, if that doesn't send up cries of alarm to people about pedophilia, I have no idea what would, and that is sponsored by our Department of Education.
These civic-based clubs exist in most major cities now, but operate outside the parent-child relationship. Such groups usually require no parental approval, even for children as young as 11 or 12 to attend. Yet such groups are widely promoted in books recommended by PFLAG and GLSEN, and now by high schools themselves through counselors and school publications. Yet tragically, this high-risk behavior has also been taken up as a cause by many pro-homosexual churches and then promoted to teens and children.
We have had so many problems in our community with kids who were indoctrinated through the homosexual-friendly churches and their youth group. They spend a lot of time on this issue. Conservative church youth groups spend relatively no time on this issue. And our kids are just not prepared. So when they go back into the high schools, the kids that have gone to the homosexual-friendly youth group, and they've spent, out of the, weekly meetings this year, a third of them have been spent on same-sex marriage, diversity. They're very well trained. They just blow these kids away in the classroom.
But another more sinister trend is the effort to silence parents, students, teachers, and others who are trying to tell the truth. Attorneys for homosexual groups have sued schools that don't allow gay clubs and have threatened to sue if any student is told about the option to choose heterosexuality instead of homosexual behavior. Stephen Bennett is a recording artist and writer who left the homosexual lifestyle in 1991. He is now married with 2 children.
I was a homosexual for most of my life until the age of 28 years old. Someone shared with me the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ and completely ministered to me, and my life totally turned around. And I stand here before you today and before God saying I do not struggle with homosexuality whatsoever. I do not look at men in a lustful way. I don't think of men during intimate relations with my wife. Jesus Christ has made me into a new creature, and that's all for His glory. We should not be encouraging students to embrace a homosexual identity for a variety of different reasons. First of all, it's ungodly. It's completely in the face of the Bible. It is totally against God. It's unnatural. We can just look, whether you're a Christian or not, you can look at the way 2 men and 2 women are designed. They don't fit together properly. It's a very unloving thing that GLSEN and these other organizations are doing, because if they truly cared for these students, they would be sharing the truth with these students. Homosexuality is something that is in comparison to drug addiction or alcoholism. It's something that we would never encourage somebody to embrace. We want them to come out of that. But what's coming into the school, I really believe, is evil. It's deceptive. It's sinister what's going on. People are being duped. I say people are falling for the gay spin zone, right from the media right on down.
Not only are the dangers of homosexual behavior being suppressed, but freedom to express one's religious views. Many students are experiencing this oppressive climate firsthand. College student Sarah Trafford graduated from high school 3 years ago.
There would be lots of debate over homosexuality, but it really wouldn't be a debate because 1 or 2 people would disagree, and then the rest of the class would completely jump on them like vultures and say that they were wrong and they hated. And in the name of tolerance and diversity and love, there was a lot of hatred, I would say, and outward, and it was accepted to hate Christians for their view on this one particular issue.
So, what are parents and communities doing about this?
So what we've spent a lot of time doing is emboldening parents, giving them the right to go and defend their children. These are your children. I always use the analogy of, would grizzly bears stop to talk about it? We need to be a little bit more of the mother bear syndrome on these issues and get in there and be willing to take the name calling. And these are your kids. You have a right to instill your values and your morality into your children.
Are parents, health officials, teachers, and students hateful to oppose homosexuality?
The dichotomy that's tried to be set up is that there's homosexual and heterosexual, and that's really not the situation, because our bodies are physically capable of doing a lot of things they shouldn't do. So the real issue here is that there is a model that works, that builds up society, and there are other models which tear down society. And this can be historically proven. It's certainly medically proven in terms of the public health approach.
I think that it's kind of the opposite. I think that really love comes from wanting your fellow brother and sister to not get into a lifestyle that is absolutely as detrimental as drugs and alcohol.
The real tragedy, many feel, is the door that is closed, and the young people who may never hear about the choice that homosexual desire and behavior can successfully and permanently change. Don't our children deserve the complete story about the risks involved and the choices available?
are being abused mentally through these promotions from these different organizations promoting homosexuality. Where are these people from GLSEN and these other organizations going to be when the mother is there at the gravestone as they're putting their son into the ground?
We have to say it again and again. We are right and they are wrong. This, Jesse's dream skirt, is wrong. What they're doing to kids is wrong. They're manipulating them. It's very destructive, and we can't stop telling other people and getting the word out to stop it.
If we lose this battle, the traditional family will lose the children and will lose the traditional family mode. And I urge, therefore, those who watch this video, you must be alerted, and you must not be passive, you must not be apathetic, and participate in making United States and Canada a better world to live in.
I believe that it encouraged others to take a stand as well. And I saw, and several people called later and said, this is an issue that is being presented in, my daughter and my son's class. And it motivated and moved them to go forward and to proceed, to say, I still can make a difference. And without a doubt, it was the right thing. So whenever you do the right thing, it's often a hard thing. But, it was a good thing. Absolutely, I would do it again.